Did you just troll me?
No, I did. I was at the last minute. I was like, "Hey, Allison, you want to do the intro?"
No, I fucked up your intro.
No, this is good. People are gonna love this. They always do. So, hi guys, and good evening, good morning, and good afternoon, wherever you may be. Welcome to Honey Badger Radio, number 46, Transmisogyny. I'm your host, Brian Martinez, and I'm joined by Allison, who occasionally is also a host, and the brainchild. And
the brainchild.
yes,
I like how you said.
Everybody, all kneel to Ramsey's team.
You said 40 sticks. You have sticks on your brain?
Yes.
You want to play with the stick?
Did you see that? I like to play with the stick.
Yeah.
Did you see the that I made a rhyme? No.
No.
Oh, I did. I totally rhymed at the beginning. Okay. Well, you'll have to go back and listen. 'Cause I'm not going to repeat it.
Oh.
But yes. So we have Allison and we have Hannah, who is our loquacious one.
Who always struggles with the evil mute button. Like I had to push it 4 times.
Yeah, no, actually this isn't Hannah. This is Google. It takes a while for it to register that you've done anything because it's just the platform. What can you do? We're just a bunch of artists here. We don't know what the fuck we're doing in general.
Apparently I'm clumsy enough to fall off the platform, so guys will have to watch and make sure I don't do that.
And then we have our special guests. We have Theryn Meyer. Hello, Theryn. Welcome. It's good to hear from you.
Hey, I'm so happy to be here. If there's anything I want to do tonight, it's talk to you guys.
Oh, and you really probably want to talk to Blaire. I know you guys are besties, so. Yeah. And we have Blaire White.
Yeah. Hi, everyone.
She doesn't reply to me on Facebook, so I have to use this opportunity to get her attention.
Oh my god. No, I'm so bad at responding on Facebook. I'm literally the worst. Sorry, there.
Actually, she replies to me really quick. Oh shit! Should I not have said that?
Oh my god, Brian. Brian doesn't really message me.
Do you want to start a fight, Brian?
I'm just gonna drink this tea.
Oh my god! Speaking of which, I just saw someone being got booted off of Facebook because he posted a status saying tranny fights aren't like girl fights, and because he used the word tranny, he got banned.
That was me. Wait,
oh my god.
Are you talking about me?
I don't know. Was that you?
Well, I talked about it on our Tuesday show where once we were talking about how Facebook has been removing people's posts and banning them for 24 hours for using what they consider to be hate language, and I got a thing where I had to re-verify myself and reread their their conduct policy messages because I used the word tranny in a sentence, and I was talking about Fallon Fox, and it was an old post from a long time ago, and I couldn't remember what the context was because they only show you the post itself, and even then I was just trying to make a point about sexual dimorphism, and I was using Fallon Fox to make that point because I think that's just that could become like a whole other topic, but I thought that the subject of Fallon Fox and how Fallon Fox is, from my understanding, destroying everyone in UFC, and no one knows how quite to deal with her. And on top of that, I believe that Ronda Rousey said that she didn't want to fight Fallon Fox. And that was what I was actually responding to. But this was before Ronda Rousey lost to that other woman whose name I can't remember. But I ended up having to be re-verified. But Blaire also had to she couldn't get on Facebook either. And I imagine that she said some things that
they're cracking down on us.
They really are, and it was right after I had posted something about how, because I reposted a feminist meme about how like men shouldn't be on the internet because it would make it a safe space for women if we got rid of them, and I posted that the internet could not exist without men. They invented it. And shortly after that, my account went down, and it was down for about 24 hours.
Yep. I would imagine that even if you guys, like, you know how
But like I made a status just the other day. I made a status saying, I'm just making this status using the word faggot and tranny just to see if I'm going to get booted. I haven't got booted yet. But
Maybe they went through and tried to figure out if you were one of the people who it's okay to say that, or the algorithm needs to know. Don't worry, big.
Mean Gene in the IRC chat just made a very interesting point. He says, "Does this mean mechanics could get banned for talking about car transmissions?"
Oh
and
my
that's
God,
a
yeah.
really good point because they call them trannies when they're talking about fixing them and stuff. They call them trannies.
right.
And let's honestly talk about the word tranny for a second. Like, I personally, I mean, me and Theryn had a discussion about this. Well, we weren't talking really, but people were talking at us on YouTube the other day about how it's an offensive word and we shouldn't use it because even if Theryn and I are okay with using it, it leaves other trans women who aren't okay with it to pick up the pieces when people think it's okay to call them a tranny. And I think Theryn and I both don't take ourselves too seriously, and we don't really have a problem using it. I don't think either one of us subscribe to this idea that words are just so powerful and can ruin your life.
That's
Here's
why
the
you're
thing.
here with the
I
rest
think,
of us shitlords.
I think the point that, because we were talking to Correctrix, actually, maybe some of you know her, she made the point that, yeah, she made the point that, so, like, people sometimes use the word tranny to distinguish us from women. It's a way of avoiding actually acknowledging that we're women. Like how she said, there's a difference between saying is that a woman or a tranny versus saying is that woman a tranny? Do you know what I mean? So her point was like people often use it to kind of distinguish us from women, to say that's not a woman, that's a tranny, and that because people use it that way, we should avoid using it ever, which I think is stupid. I do believe words don't have power, but ideas have, and we convey ideas through words. But that doesn't mean that the word tranny is inherently bad. It's about the idea or the sentiment behind it. So, yeah.
Yeah, and can I say, I don't think I've ever in my life, and this is totally honest, and if it sounds crazy, maybe it sounds crazy, but I've never been called a tranny in a disparaging way. I never have. Have you, Theryn?
Only on the internet, not in real life.
But like even on the internet, I don't think anyone's ever been like, "Oh, you fucking tranny." Like if someone wants to insult a trans woman, they'll say like, "Oh, you're a man." They won't say, "Oh, you're a tranny." You know what I mean? That's what I found at least.
I would also. I'm just curious. This is me, more like kind of being a bit OCD or maybe over evaluating it. But the word tranny isn't it more like the word, I don't know, Aussie or Brit or something, where it's simply just a shortening of the longer word that is essentially the actual definite, like the actual descriptive term, like transgendered person. And if you replace and I'm just asking the question, but like in the statement that Theryn pointed out when she said when people use the phrase, is that a woman or a tranny, or is that woman a tranny, if you exchange the word tranny for the word transgendered person or transgendered, would that statement, those two statements, is that woman transgendered or is that a woman or a transgendered person?
It's equally because it conveys the exact same idea.
Exactly. Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Exactly.
It conveys the same
So
idea.
it's not about the word itself, but that was just, I guess, the point that was made. This person that we were talking about is that that's how the word tranny is often used. Not like disparaging, they're not going out of their way to be disparaging, but they're using tranny as a category that women does not intersect with tranny in these people's minds, oftentimes. So I get where she came from in that sense, but I still think that it's stupid to say that you can't ever use the word tranny.
I think the reason why I'm like okay with being called a tranny or whatever, as long as it's not like in a serious way, like, oh, are you a tranny? Like that's kind of weird, but I guess I don't mind being in a separate category than the typical woman. Like I do feel like women still intersects with being trans. I think a lot of people think that as well. But I guess the reason why I'm not so anal about it is because I don't mind being differentiated from a biological woman.
But you know what? Neither do I. But here's the thing: historically and just generally, the term tranny has been used to refer to like transvestites, drag queens, cross dressers. Basically, it does have a pretty strong association with men who dress up. So that's.
I guess so. I guess like in the past that's what it was more of like an umbrella term, but I feel like these days it's more of like people understand that that strictly means like someone who's transgender, because I've seen a lot of conversations where someone will post like, is this a cross-dresser or a tranny? So they're making that differentiation. I guess it has been an umbrella term in the past, but I guess maybe recently it seems like it's more strictly for trans people.
Okay, Anna wants to say something. Go, Anna.
Well, just something you guys were mentioning earlier. Sorry about being late, so I'm like adding in my 2 cents. Like I'm here, I promise. I'm taking this seriously, I swear. But no, it was really important, something that Blaire mentioned that totally made me think about 2 things actually. On one hand, there is, I think, what she was referring to, and totally valid points about the the umbrella term and all that. But yeah, I think it might have changed now. And also, there are people who use it the same way as dyke is used for lesbians. And I personally know Lily Kate, and she's like has absolutely no problem with the word dyke, even though it could be considered as like hate speech, something like that was in the past, or that was associated with a lot of harassment of those sorts of people, but she personally doesn't see it as being something terribly offensive, as long as it's, for the most part, meant fairly friendly. So I think that's kind of a component of something that might be happening with the word tranny, where people say it to each other, or drag queens or transsexual women or men say it to each other, and things like that. But another, I think, point is something Blaire also was referring to in terms of not getting hate speech, or rather being called like that one offensive word, even on the internet. And I think that happens sometimes. There are certain individuals that just come off a certain way. I haven't really demystified it myself, but I experience this too, like where I see feminists that I'm engaging in debate with, or like well, they're not social justice warriors, they're social injustice warriors, the SJW types. I'm going to call them culture warriors because that's what they're really doing, and culture bullies. And they are really mean to other people that are engaged with them on my side, sort of the argument, but they're never really super hurtful to me, and I've never really been called a whore in a horrible way other than by like one disgruntled MGTOW, but it doesn't, not really on the internet. People don't seem to react very viscerally to some people on the opposite side of sort of the fence, but they do react to others like really meanly. Like there was a feminist that was attacking Mercedes and Vicky Valkyrie's appearances while she was being fairly civil with me while we were engaged in the same conversation. And it was really baffling. And I think that happens sometimes, and I just wanted to throw that out there, that occasionally some people will get just like vitriolic hate, and others will really not sort of be attacked in the same way through ad hominem. So there's just kind of an interesting trend I noticed. I don't know if you guys have noticed that, but I just want to throw that out there.
I also wanted to add I'm sorry, Blaire, go ahead.
No, you can go, Brian.
Oh, I was just going to say that one of the other things I noticed is that when you were explaining Theryn, you're talking about the umbrella usage that the word tranny has, where it talks about transvestites, it talks about men that cross-dress, drag queens, etc. I find it's really interesting that this word tranny, when it was used as an umbrella term, sounds like it really was more so directed at men that were either becoming women or dressing as women or behaving, trying to be like essentially people that were moving from the male to the female as opposed to the opposite direction. And I'm trying to remember any cases where a woman that was like dressing as a man or.
You're so on point, Brian. Actually, when I added the male to female people to the hate speech of tranny, I realized actually no. I did a mental check and was like, no, actually, I don't think I've ever seen female to male transsexuals getting called tranny. It's always kind of been an insultful thing, like sissy, to men becoming women. So you're
Yeah, that was just my observation. It seems to go only that one way. But I want to hear from Blaire and Hannah. Blaire and Theryn, if you guys have a response to what I was just thinking about.
I think what's interesting, someone in the comments or the chat said that they associate the word tranny with porn because they use it when they're searching for porn. And I think that's really a testament to what I was saying earlier about how it used to be an umbrella term. But in recent years, we've seen kind of like an explosion of the popularity of trans porn, trans women specifically. And I think that honestly is part of the association that people are making. Oh, yes, this means a trans woman, a woman with the dick, a woman who's transitioning, or a man who's transitioning to a woman. Whereas before, I think it was used more widely for cross-dressers, etc.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, we don't have to conclude, but this is my conclusive statement. I think that if a word is being used in a way that you don't like, don't give it more power by saying, now don't use that word at all, because those other people, they're using it in a bad way. How about people like me and Blaire start using the word tranny like it should be used, in a fun way, referring to trans women without invalidating their womanhood, and that's kind of just comes back to individual agency and changing things that you want changed, not just sitting back and let the authoritative cultural forces just act upon you.
I wanted to say something about this. It's a little different. This is something that I think I originally read the concept in Steven Pinker's The Blank Slate. Words, when we start using them with a disdain or a negative connotation, and then people who don't want that connotation, they'll replace them with another word. That new word ends up very often developing the same connotation, and it just creates a cycle. And this is something that, like, if you look at the history of words that have been become unacceptable ways to describe a person with dark skin, you look back in American history, colored people became, it went from being a description of people with more dark color to their skin to being a slur. But you can say people of color, and it's not a slur because that's the newer way of saying it. For a while, it was very unacceptable to say black. You say people of color or African American, even though not all people with dark skin are African American or African descent. And these are things that, like, when you create that power and that giving a negative connotation to that word, you simply create a sort of a power in describing the term, not the term itself, but in describing the thing the term describes. And the same thing has occurred with mental retardation. In the early part of the 20th century, the word retardation wasn't even used. There were other terms that were used to describe somebody who had any degree of intellectual disability. And it went from that to mentally retarded and developmentally delayed, developmentally disabled, things like that, because those previous terms were determined to be too derogatory, and they got used in a derogatory way. And now the industry that provides care for people with those disabilities no longer uses the term retarded, because retarded is used as a as not a slur, but it's used with negative connotations to describe all kinds of things. And so they've gone to using, or I should say we've gone to using, intellectually disabled. And it's a little more difficult to, turn that into something that you say about everything. Oh, that's so intellectually disabled is probably never going to become a way people respond to something. And you see the same thing with the use of the word faggot, where it's in some forums it doesn't have connotations towards sexuality at all. In fact, like on 4chan, as Karen has mentioned, you can't just call someone a fag and be referring to their sexuality. You have to call them a gay fag to be referring to their sexuality. And if if they don't know what they're doing in there, they're a new fag. If they know everything about the place, they're an old fag. And all that. It has absolutely nothing to do with sexuality because the term has changed, and it may or may not end up the same with the term tranny. I don't know how that's going to evolve, but I think that running away from it would simply create another, I guess, another PowerPoint for people with prejudices, where they can say, well, if I have use a term to describe being transgendered, and I use that term with a negative connotation, like I use it with disdain, or I use it in anger, or I use it as an accusation instead of just a description, then I can make being transgendered an ugly thing because I'm describing it like it's an ugly thing. And that kind of power, we don't want to give anybody that kind of power. It's not right for somebody to be able to do that to a group of people.
I think they're already trying to switch the terms up and associate terms with a negative connotation already. I mean, the new thing with trans is they're now putting an asterisk next to it, and they're trying to, turn it into some huge umbrella term and have it branch out to all these different meanings. So, I mean, social justice warriors change the definitions of words at a whim. So I wouldn't be surprised if tranny is completely changed eventually.
Yeah, they'll likely embrace it, or who knows. Blaire, I think you cut off. I don't know if you meant to or not, though.
Oh no, I was done.
Oh, okay, you were done. All right, well, why don't we get into the main topic? Theryn has gone through the grueling process of doing quite a long write-up. I was actually watching you as you were writing it, and I was in the room before the show going, Theryn's going to be here in a minute. I can just see that she's doing some edits. And I wanted to type into the thing with you to be like, hey, we're about to start, but it wouldn't let me. So why don't you share that with us?
That's kind of creepy, Brian.
I was trying to talk to you because you weren't responding to the Twitters, and Blaire was trying to reach you, and
Yeah.
you were just in writing mode.
I was in writing mode, yeah.
Yeah.
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to read it, and it is quite long. It's 1,800 words. So if it gets kind of tired and I feel like maybe we need a breakout session and just have people talk about what I just said, I'm just going to stop.
Yeah, just stop after you think
continue.
you've established a good point, or you think that what you've written could be a way to open up the conversation.
Okay. And once again, I kind of wrote it today. I started writing it this morning. It's not very formal. Okay. So here it goes. The whole of gender is greater than the sum of its parts. This maxim explains why so many women can get away with donning a masculine hairline, a V-shaped figure, or be the tallest person in the room without being perceived as a man. Because even though these attributes can be read as male or at least masculine, they are presented amidst an abundance of female or feminine attributes on the same body. In this way, gender and the perception of it is very much an additive game. An input of small sexual traits and gender cues gets subconsciously and rapidly added together by the eye to produce a sum total of either a male or female reading as the output. It is this additive game that humans play when judging gender that trans people seek to harness, master, and manipulate. I often get comments like, I don't know why you have such a hang-up over your voice, Theryn. Lots of women have deeper voices. Or, don't worry about your forehead. Many models have big foreheads. Or, don't worry about your hands. Karen Strawn has man hands and she looks perfectly female. But this line of thinking misses the point of harnessing, mastering, and manipulating the additive process by which we perceive and judge gender. Unlike cisgender women, such masculine attributes aren't present amidst an abundance of feminine attributes so generously provided by those XX chromosomes in the first place. Instead, they inhabit an already androgynous bodily landscape, which makes these attributes' contribution to the risk of tipping the perceptual scale to the male side so much more significant. I didn't feminize my voice simply to have a more feminine voice. I'm not saving up for a scalp advancement surgery simply so that I can have a more feminine forehead. Instead, I and other trans people alter these individual parts as a means to an end of shifting the perceptual whole, the gender gestalt, if you will, through the additive process. Speaking of my voice, yesterday the pharmacy called me to tell me that my prescriptions are ready to be picked up. The system has me under my legal name, which is still my birth name, much to my frustration. So the pharmacist told me, so if you could just tell him that he can come pick up his prescriptions, that would be great, thank you. And this was like a testament to the fact that my voice alone is now undoubtedly female, at least to some, such that the pharmacist assumed that even though he called the number of the patient, I must have been the patient's wife or girlfriend answering the phone or something. Speaking on the phone is a unique circumstance, seeing as the voice as a gender signifier is isolated from all other physical attributes and cues, which makes it a huge challenge and daunting task for most trans people. Needless to say, it was very validating. I would actually encourage you guys to go listen to my very first appearance on Honey Badger Radio, the one called I'm No Sissy. The change in my voice is quite remarkable. Anyway, as one would expect, there is no purely objective calculator that all humans use to add together all the sexual traits and gender cues of an individual to come up with an answer to, is that a man or a woman? Instead, every person has their own subjective calculator that is shaped by the environmental, cultural, biological, and evolutionary psychological factors. These factors shape our understanding of what it means to be or look like a man or a woman. A less spoken of yet interesting factor that influences people's gender calculators is the varying degree of neoteny, meaning the retention of juvenile features in adult animals, expressed along racial lines. From my observations, a black trans woman, black being a race with comparatively little neoteny, will have a much harder time registering as female to an Asian person, especially if that Asian person was raised amongst Asian people and Asian culture, as the Asian race expresses a comparatively high degree of neoteny. Having that said, I'm no evolutionary psychologist. Another intriguing phenomenon that I've observed to arise due to the subjective nature of people's gender calculators is that trans people have a much easier time passing in more traditional and socially conservative environments where the possibility of being trans is not even a point of reference to most people in these environments. Conversely, trans people have a much harder time passing, at least as cisgender, in progressive environments like large cities, where people are much more informed on trans issues and consider being trans as a legitimate possibility. The catch-22 is that even though it's considerably easier to pass, a trans person runs a much higher risk of violence, hostility, and ostracism when she is outed in socially conservative environments than in socially progressive environments where trans acceptance is commonplace, but passing is more difficult. In other words, the more trans people are accepted into mainstream culture, the harder it is to pass. One thing that is consistent among everyone's gender calculators is that they are cisnormative. Now, I know what you're thinking, that's a stupid SJW term. And SJWs have indeed poisoned the well when it comes to this topic. But in this context, cisnormative simply means that the standard that must be met before an individual does or does not register as male or female is based on the average cisgender man or woman. Whether trans people being judged by cisgender standards is wrong or unjust or needs to be corrected is an unanswered question to me. What I do know for certain, however, is that this cisnormativity makes it very hard, even impossible, for some trans people, especially trans women, to win the additive game and pass as the gender that they identify with. So what happens when, say, a trans woman loses the additive gender game? Well, there is a reasonable likelihood of physical assault, a high likelihood of some hostility and social shunning, and according to feminists, an almost guaranteed experience of what they would call transmisogyny. I have on many platforms, including HBR, dispelled the travesty that is transmisogyny and sought to reframe the phenomenon to reflect reality more closely. And in reality, it is when the traits and cues of a trans woman are tallied up to render the conclusion that that is a man in the mind of a bigot, that trans women are at such uniquely high risk of violence and hostility. Because the social ostracism that trans women face occurs when we are perceived not as women, but as corrupt, duplicitous, and defective men. It was not when I lost the additive game of gender and was read as male that it was when I lost the additive game of gender and was read as male that my dress was yanked up by a group of assholes in a club. Conversely, it was when I won the additive game of gender and was read as female that a passerby came to my protection when I was being threatened by a mentally ill man on the street. Clearly, all the supposedly trans-misogynistic injustices that encumber trans women are not a product of cultural misogyny, but actually a reflection and projection of our culture's misinterest, attitudes, and views of men. And I'm going to stop there for now, but there is more to go.
Oh, you answered the question I was just about to ask at the end there, when I was just going to talk about why does the term transmisogyny exist, and yet there's also the term transphobic, when a lot of times people who are not completely accepting or are critical or even outright bigoted towards trans people, you would find that the term transphobic would be adequate, even though it's a little bit of a shaky in terms of its definition, much like the term Islamophobic. But a lot of times people use it in the same way that they use the term homophobic or sexist or racist. But now we have this other term, transmisogynist or transmisogyny, and I think that you are essentially touching on the answer to that question, which is, it's kind of twofold. One, why do we have two terms when one would probably suffice? And then secondly, would there even be such a thing as transmisandry? Would you call it that if we were talking about, say, a woman's, going through the change to become a man or more like a man? That was my first thing that I wanted to throw out there. So, and Blaire's already got her name in there.
Okay, so here's why the word transphobic isn't sufficient enough for SJWs and feminists, because this is something that me and Theryn have talked about quite a bit, that feminists, if the game of gender politics is football, trans people are often the ball. So they use this concept of transmisogyny to further their narrative that, see how hard it is being a woman? When a man becomes a woman, suddenly they experience misogyny and they experience all of the things that women go through. But the problem with that is that when you call something misogynistic or racist or homophobic or anything like that, it's an attempt at getting into the head of the perpetrator, whether it's just a vocal harassment situation or physical violence. You're attempting to get into the head of the perpetrator or the person acting it out. And the problem is it's really lazy to come to the conclusion that it's misogyny, because in reality, if someone has hatred towards a trans woman or wants to do something to accost a trans woman, they're not registering them in their head of, this is a woman, this is a trans woman. They're saying, look at this man, look at this fucked up man. It has nothing to do with being a woman, because the person isn't registering them as a woman.
Yeah, that is exactly it.
Yeah, and oh my god, I think I just lost my thought. Oh my god. Yeah, I lost my thought. Someone else go.
Okay. Cherry.
I just kind of lost my train of thought.
Oh my.
I know, it's the worst.
I have mine.
Can you remind me of the question again? Because it's like right on the tip of my brain.
No, I think Blaire got hers back. We're going to try and get it while we have the spark, and then I'll repeat it.
Yeah, I have mine. Okay, so, and the problem with SJWs and feminists is that they're so obsessed with taking people's identities at their word that they've got themselves into a conundrum where they can't call it misandry, even though it obviously is, because they say this person says they're a woman, then they're obviously a woman, and it can only be misogyny if they're treated badly. When in reality, this is the cold hard truth, most trans women do not pass. They just don't. I think trans men have an easier time passing. Trans women, for the most part, do not. You have to be pretty lucky to pass. You know, there's a lot of...
rich.
Or rich. But even then, look at Caitlyn Jenner. She can't fucking pass, and she's 6'7" and fucking loaded. But
or there was that one person that spent like lots and lots of money to get like her perfect ideal body, and it looked like it was. I mean, it was. I don't know what I saw, but it wasn't. Money was not enough, is what I'm saying. Like you have to look that way. I think she went through several operations that cost lots of money, but she must have gone to a really cheap doctor or something. But
yeah, it's a combination of you have to have hit not necessarily the genetic lottery, but you have to have a decent base to start with. You can't be like 6'5" and fucking hairy as hell. That just doesn't work.
I'm 5'11". Don't hate on the tall girls.
Sorry, 5'11" is not that bad. It's not tall at all, honestly. I know I have a lot of girlfriends who are 5'11".
It's not tall in the Netherlands. Did you know that the average height in the Netherlands, this is like men and women, average height 6 foot.
Oh my god.
6 fucking foot. I know.
That's crazy. And like you said, it is an additive game. So trans women, the thought process that we usually have is that we count the amount of male secondary sex characteristics that we have, and we figure out ways to manipulate them. And that's kind of how you can work towards passing. Obviously, like I said, there's things that you can't control. You have to have luck with certain things, but there are certain things you can control even without surgery. And so it is an additive game, like Theryn said.
All right, Cherry. You did not actually. Blaire had lost her thought, and then you came on, and then you lost your thought, and then Blaire got her thought back. So I brought her back on, and now you have your thought back.
I lost my thought so much, I didn't notice Blaire losing hers. That's quite epic. Good job, us. We're not perpetuating the dumb woman stereotype at all. No, I'm just playing. But I do remember. So 2 things. One, I will address the misogyny, transphobia thing as later. But the interesting thing that you guys are bringing up right now is transphobia. I'm sure, obviously, it's a thing in terms of like, I don't want to use the word like systemic, but in form of like, like the bathrooms, and there's, in general, there's obviously an oppressive attitude in some situations, and sometimes, and with some people, especially the less educated people, I'm sure, and there's like the staring and the variety of other things for trans people who do not pass, trans women who do not pass, and there's obviously abuse in some localized form or another. However, what I've noticed is, well, first of all, as we know, there was a female to male transsexual, and she, I think, was it 2020 or some other program that she was on after, basically living as a man. She was lesbian, and she was like living as a man. And actually, I don't remember which one it was. It was either a transitioning person or a lesbian living as a man. But either way, the experience of basically being seen as male and passing as male was so emotionally damaging because of the way society treats men, that this woman had to check into, a mental rehabilitation program to try to get, some of her depression lifted due to this experience. And I've also noticed during, like, when I lived in the Mid-South, of all places, at the cons, there was a guy who we would play a game all together with the whole con, usually every year, around the same place, late into the wee hours of the morning. And it's one of those games where large groups of people are just like sort of yelling at each other. I don't know if you guys know Werewolf. It's also been shortened to One Night. In Werewolf, and like everyone, it's sort of like a spin-off of a mafia game. I'm not really sure about the history of it, but
I know it.
Right, it's a fun game where you have to figure out who is sort of the hidden predator, and then all the villagers get killed off every night, and there's less of you and more, obviously, of the werewolves if you don't kill them off. And then everybody votes who to lynch, so there's even less villagers, and it's just kind of a game of wits, but also just a lot of yelling. Anyway, it was kind of a tradition, and every year we would go and play with the same people, basically. And I watched this one guy who was called Lynchbait, and we didn't know his name. We just called him Lynchbait because of the shirt he wore, and we see him every year at that game. And he slowly morphed into what was more of a female-presenting person. We were like, what is happening? Over the period of like 5 years, we watched this person, like, he was like wearing a dress one year with like longer hair, and the next year he was wearing a dress with longer hair and a person. We were like, what is going on with Lynchbait? Is he a lady? Is he a dude? What is happening? But what is also a kind of a thing that I noticed is that people treat women-looking people gentler, nicer, softer. Obviously, not in the places where there's transphobia and people are treated badly, but for the most part, in generally polite company, etc., people who appear or are trying to pass as female get actually treated softly and gently by society on average. So it's really interesting that we're kind of bringing that up because even if they do not pass and do seem like masculine people trying to look like women, there's still kind of a, like nobody is really allowed to make fun of Caitlyn Jenner. That's like not a thing. It's so not a thing. It's a meme. There's kind of a gentler gloves, softer gloves that women are, or women looking, women passing, women non-passing, just female, feminine things are treated in our society as opposed to the masculine. And I think that speaks to how we view men and women. And on top of that, we have this whole trans misogyny, right? So that whole thing is, I can't even, it's pseudo intellectualism mixed with postmodernism, mixed with, people wanting to sound smart and then other people wanting to create issues that don't necessarily exist, but just to perpetrate the idea that women are victims, that anything to do with women is attacked. So they, tack on this experience that people have that is negative because of transphobia, and they're like, no, it's transmisogyny. It's because you at your core hate women and you hate these men for becoming women. And it's like you sort of can follow where they're coming from because it's like it makes sense if you don't think about it, but when you do, it's like, no, this is its own occurrence that has nothing to do with the female gender just because it happens to be involved. It's causative, or is correlative, not causative. So I think it's a lot of times, depends on who's saying the word, it's either people trying to be really spiteful and mean because they're wanting to progress or advance their ideology of women are victims, or it's people who don't really know what they're talking about and are just using it as like basically pseudo-intellectual smart word, and they're like, our society is rife with, transmisogyny, and that makes me sound smart when I masturbate words into the conversation that are big and I don't know what they mean. So.
Well, I would have to blame feminism more for this than people who don't know what they're talking about, because this isn't the only instance of them doing this. I mean, if you look at the feminist discussion of, say, prison rape and how they've tried to make that misogyny when it often doesn't involve women at all, it's not about ignorance, and it's not about not understanding the situation. It's about trying to co-opt another group's victim issue that is a real situation because they don't have their own, or they don't have enough of their own, or their own aren't effective enough anymore because their own aren't big enough or bad enough to sell what they're trying to sell as far as, inroads for authoritative control over people's personal interactions and stuff. So I think it's really a more of co-opting other people's adversity for their own victim narrative, way more than it is people not understanding what they're talking about. And yeah, a lot of third wavers are basically feminism's useful idiots, but I don't think they're dumb enough to do this with zero understanding of it. And I don't think that they actually are ignorant enough that they can't see the reason that trans women get hated on isn't because they're women. I know it's because people think of them as men. And the other thing is, I think a lot of the discussion of the difference in the way trans men and trans women are treated, we also have to take into account, I think, that biological women have sort of more breathing room to be gender atypical than biological men do. And it's been that way for a very long time. Even when girls would get criticized for being called tomboy, it's not as bad as the way, it's not as big of a deal as the way boys are getting, or would get treated for being too effeminate. It's like when a man or a boy does it, he's encroaching on women's territory in the eyes of people that are prejudiced against that. Whereas when a woman or a girl does it, she's treated like she's being courageous or edgy or just different. And often people don't even consider it abnormal anymore. So I think it's kind of it's not just that people are gentler with women and girls who are and people who present in a feminine way. I think it's also that biological women are given more leeway. You know, it's an area where we're coddled.
Blaire.
Okay, so I remembered a story while we were talking about all of this, and I was once a part of a transgender support group. I didn't need support, but I went just to see what it was about. And I went for a couple times, and the head of the group was a trans man. And I remember him talking about his transition and saying how he felt worse for the trans women in the room, me and a few others, than for the trans men, because he said that as a trans man, he felt like he transitioned into privilege, meaning he went from woman to man and suddenly was in a new, a privileged status. And I remember someone asked him, like, what were those privileges that you think that you suddenly have? And they weren't asking out of skepticism, they were just having a conversation. And I remember very clearly he couldn't really articulate any of them. Meanwhile, I had an entire discussion in that group about all of the things that I saw as privilege transitioning into a woman. But I think it was very telling that none of the trans men in the room could even list a single quote-unquote privilege that they transitioned into.
Theryn, get in here.
It was interesting. Like Anna mentioned, the lesbian woman who lived as a man for like quite a while, and that stepping into the masculine role was like traumatizing for her, and she needed therapy and stuff. I remember that. I don't remember her name, but it's just interesting to me because, from my experience, trans men are like content, and no hate to my trans men listening, but they can tend to be like the biggest feminist SJWs on fucking earth. It's like I've seen this in the past, but like they're like bearded lesbians.
Okay, so the woman you're thinking about, her name was Nora Vincent, and she lived as a man for 18 months. And you can find the full documentary about it on YouTube. Just look her up, Nora Vincent.
Just disclaimer. I love trans men. I've dated trans men. I'm not anti-trans men, but there is a trend in the trans male community that they have this mentality of like SJW feminists, and they just sound like a lesbian with a beard. So that's it.
I'm having cider. What are you having? I just want to know.
What am I having?
Yes. What are you having? Are you drinking it?
I wish I had something. I wish I had something.
Okay. Anna's got coffee. Dull. Okay, so no, that's okay. I love coffee to death in the morning.
Oh, excuse me. It is made with the homemade little like espresso machine. Okay. I could have even had a froth half and half in it for a breve, but I didn't feel like going through the trouble.
It's not bulletproof coffee?
It's what?
It's not the bulletproof coffee, you know, the stuff that's made with...
No, but I did have that once when shooting on the Dr. Horrible set from like the podcast show thingy in LA. I was doing a cosplay set there, and the owner of the house actually had bulletproof coffee, and I had it, and it was very interesting and more of a meal than a beverage.
I'm having hard cider because I love hard cider. I fucking love it. Okay, so I wanted to throw a couple things in there that I was thinking about. One was in Theryn, when you were doing a write-up about how trans people, how easily they pass depending on how progressive or highly populated a given city is, and how these two experiences are different. And one of the things I was thinking about was that I've noticed, I live in Chicago, and it's one of the biggest cities in this country, and it's extremely progressive as well. We have a whole, it's progressive, but there's also something weird about it, and it might be unique to Chicago, but I don't know that it is. we have neighborhoods in Chicago where mostly homosexual, bisexual, and trans people live. There's one I used to live really close to that they call Boys Town. It was basically really close to Wrigley Field, and it was a gay community. It was like a neighborhood, and all of the gays lived there.
What's
And
up, in San Francisco? I
yeah,
thought you were going to for a moment talk about the, what is it, Chanel Street or Canal Street? Canal Street. That street smells like ass. Like every time I've been in Chicago, there's always a stench of butt on Canal, no matter what.
no. As funny as a street named Canal smelling like ass would be,
That is pretty funny.
that is pretty funny. This is actually even funnier because it's called Broadway. But this, I am not kidding. That's where they
I
live.
thought you were going to mention the fact that South Chicago has supposedly had more kills in it or deaths since 2011, I believe, than Iraq of like American people that have died.
Well, yeah, but that's
What's up with that, Chicago?
I mean, that's true, but that's happening in other parts of the city, completely separate from. The funny thing is that where Boys Town is, there's a lot of money there, and actually, for whatever reason, homosexual men, they bring home tons of cash, and they do really well with it. But that is a bit of diversion of my point. What I was going to say is that while it's interesting, and I agree with what Theryn is saying, one of the things that I've also observed that I find interesting is that in cities that are highly populated, that are very progressive, trans people are more accepted, but they're also kind of like treated as though they are a third category. Like they're a third category of
it's the
gender.
big catch-22. You know, can I tell you a story that kind of encapsulates?
Yeah, please.
Okay, so I went to Mexico over the summer break, and we went to like a resort, and I was there with my parents, and literally the whole time I was in my bathing costume and everything, and I had zero problem, and it was mainly because like they don't really consider trans as a possibility. They're just like, oh, that's a woman. But like if I were like on the beach in like Vancouver, I would undoubtedly be like, they'd be like, oh, that's a trans woman. And it's like they wouldn't be hateful or anything. They'd be just like, oh, that is a trans woman. You know? At least I think so, you know? And like another example, for my club, we were doing street interviews, and we were asking people about circumcision. And I started, the first question I asked, I would ask people is, how do you feel about bodily autonomy? Is it important to you? And they immediately, so many of them, not all of them, but so many of them thought that I was talking about a trans person's right to do with their body what they want to. Just because, just like, which is a little presumptuous, I must say, but but like, just because I asked the question, and I'm like, no, we're talking about circumcision, honey. But so yeah, there's those two things. So like, and it is kind of annoying. Like sometimes I don't want me being trans being made a thing the whole time. But then in Mexico, I feel like if I were clocked as trans and like someone was like, oh, that's a man, you know, my risk of getting some shit happening is higher, you know, because Mexico isn't particularly progressive. It's pretty like, I don't know, Catholic and whatever.
Yeah, very religious.
Blaire wants to say something.
Oh, I know. I wanted to say one more thing before Blaire jumps in. I know Blaire, I'm gonna let you finish, but but no, the other thing I wanted to say is that when dealing with the whole like bigotry towards trans people, which often comes from a combination of ignorance, and there are people who are mad because they feel like Theryn pointed out, they feel deceived, things like that. I think that it is a uniquely difficult kind of I don't know, like a uniquely difficult set of assumptions that we are working on, and I think that in many ways we are I think that the stuff dealing with trans people is moving pretty fast compared to other kinds of sort of prejudice that we've dealt with in the past. But I think that it's probably one of the trickiest ones to deal with too. The conversation is being had though, and it's not as though.
I think it's being dealt with fast because it's just like that last that last letter in the acronym that just needs to be dealt with now. In many people's minds, it's like, okay, we had the gay rights movement, and somehow we forgot about trans people way back in the 70s. So let's just get this fucking shit over with.
Yeah. Okay. So that's all I want to say. I just think it's a tough one, but I mean we're working on it. So, and Blaire, I'm sorry, I totally Kanye'd you, but you can go now.
Okay, I just wanted to, you kind of went off with Theryn's point, but I'm going to go back to it. When Theryn was talking about how in Mexico, like, she wasn't clocked, and, like, mostly because, like, trans isn't seen as a possibility there. I have noticed, it's very, very interesting, certain areas, I think no matter if they're conservative or liberal, it really depends on the culture that's around on whether or not you'll get clocked. Like, Middle Eastern men will always fucking clock you. Always. Middle Eastern men can clock a tranny from a mile away, and it's not because they want to
like them. That's because they want to fuck them.
Yes, Middle Eastern men absolutely
every
love
guy on a dating website is Middle Eastern. I'm not kidding you. This is a thing. Anyway.
Yes, my friend requests on Facebook are literally like the ones I haven't accepted are just nothing but men from like Middle Eastern countries.
Yeah.
Totally crazy. And I remember when I was younger, when I was like 15, I used to go to this place called Arabian Nights, and I shouldn't have been there. I was too young, but I was young, and my other friend was with me, and she was also trans, and like it would be so much male attention from these Middle Eastern men, and it was insane. And then I noticed, like, while we're on the topic of Chicago, the last time I got clocked was in Chicago. I like was walking down the street with my boyfriend or something. Yeah, I was with my boyfriend. And I was walking to a bar, and someone literally was like, "That's a fucking man," and I was like, "Oh my god," because that just doesn't happen to me. And then I'm living in a small town right now where I think trans is not seen as a possibility, and I could walk out of the house looking like fucking anything, and no one would ever clock me.
Blaire, what part of Chicago were you in? I know it's a really big city. I'm just curious. Do you remember?
Girl, I don't know. I'm not like privy to, or I'm not like familiar with all of Chicago.
Was it sketchy, or was it like pretty decent?
I mean, honestly, everywhere in Chicago is kind of sketchy if you're not like on Mission Avenue. What's it called, Michigan Avenue?
No, that's a good point.
Yeah, like it's all a little bit sketchy.
There are areas that are far sketchier than the average, and like where I live, it can be a little sketchy at night. People, because the lights are, it's not very well lit here. But there's places like a mile away that are like, it's like Escape from New York. Like, you don't want to go there. Nobody wants to go there. But yeah, it's got its really, really bad parts.
Another thing, interestingly enough, you say that whole Middle Eastern men can clock you. I don't know if they can clock you because of their culture and like that trans women just don't fit the categories of their culture, or just because they're out to look for trans women. But I find, like especially like trans Asian women generally have a pretty easy time passing, and I think it's mostly because of like neoteny and whatever. However, they have a very hard time passing in their own culture, because people are a lot more sensitive to their race's like cues and physical attributes. So like me as like a white person who grew up amongst white people will have a harder time identifying, oh, that's a trans woman if they're Asian, but that trans woman would have a really hard time, or have a harder time passing in her own culture, like say Vietnam.
Black girls will always clock you. I don't give a fuck. Every black girl will clock you, and she'll be rude about it too.
I wouldn't know. I'd like, there are no black people, not a lot of black people in Vancouver.
No, not a lot.
There are very few black people here, but the black girls always clock me.
Asian ladies who do your nails clock you.
Oh yeah. Actually, like children and dogs, they always know too.
What? I brought a person who is a Canadian, like born and raised, to Chicago. She came to visit me, and by the time she left, she was like, "I have never seen so many black people in my life." But ironically, interestingly, when I go to Canada, I always say, "I've never seen so many brown people in my life." Well, it's weird. It's just our history. But yeah. Lots of black folks in Chicago. I guess we can.
I could continue with the.
Yes, that was actually what I was going to say. You want to continue with the?
Yeah, just
Okay.
the end bit.
Let's do it.
Okay. It's not. Yeah. So this is the end bit. I'm gonna rewind a tiny bit just so that we
have some context.
Yeah. There we go. So what happens when, say, a trans woman loses the additive gender game? While there is a reasonable likelihood of physical assault, a high likelihood of hostility and social shunning, and according to feminists, an almost guaranteed experience of what they like to call transmisogyny. I have on many platforms, including HBR, dispelled the travesty that is transmisogyny and sought to reframe the phenomenon to reflect reality more closely. In reality, it is when the traits and cues of a trans woman are tallied up to render the conclusion that is a man in the mind of a bigot that trans women are at such a uniquely high risk of violence and hostility. Because the social ostracism that trans women face occurs when we are perceived not as women but as corrupt, duplicitous, and defective men. It was when I lost the additive gender game and was read as male that my dress was yanked up by a group of assholes in a club. Conversely, it was when I won the additive game of gender and was read as female that a passerby came to my protection when I was being threatened by a mentally ill man on the street. Clearly, all the supposedly trans-misogynistic injustices that encumber trans women are not a product of cultural misogyny, but actually a reflection and projection of our culture's misandrous attitudes and views of men. A hypothesis that I have put forth in the past in my video titled Growing Up as a Boy is that, and I quote, "The levels of violence, hostility, and social shunning that trans women face is only possible once the subject in question has been consigned to the bottom rung of the social hierarchy after being deemed worthless. And what worth has a man which holds not those male attributes that allow him to fulfill the role of provider and protector of women, children, and society? What worth has a man which holds instead those female attributes that would designate him to the role of provided for and protected by men in society, when he himself bears no reproductive capacity with which to put such provisions and protections towards the continuance of his species? Such a man is deemed not only worthless, but a parasitical and deceptive misallocation of scarce resources." End quote. And I quoted that because I didn't feel like paraphrasing it. To end off, I want to circle back to cis-normativity as a concept and relate it to the much contested and much hated concept of privilege. An injustice that I can discern as originating from the phenomenon of quote, cis-normativity is the estimation of value and legitimacy of trans individuals, especially trans women, according to how closely they resemble the cisgender ideal. One example was brought up by a transgender YouTuber that I watch on occasion. Her name is Julie Vu, where she was recounting a visit to the nail salon. While she was getting her nails done, a couple of employees were snickering at another trans woman in the salon, nitpicking her masculine appearance and making fun of her for not passing. Julie spoke up and said that as a trans woman herself, she doesn't think that's cool and that they should probably stop doing that. The employees replied by saying, "Oh, but you're beautiful," which is just another way of saying, "Oh, but you pass well." This kind of ranking of how worthy trans women are of common decency and civility according to how well they satisfy cisgender criteria is quite plainly cruel and unjust, especially when the reality is that most trans women didn't win the genetic lottery, when they have a hard passing and cannot begin to think of raking together the money for the medical procedures that would make them more passable. When feminists and SJWs alike employ the term privilege, they do so for a number of reasons, none of them savory. One method of employment of the term is as an underhanded argumentative tactic. Quote, "You're male, therefore you're not allowed to speak," or "You're male, therefore you don't understand," or "You're male, therefore your opinion is invalid." None of these are logically sound argumentative tactics, obviously, because none of them actually seek to address the arguments in question on their own merits. The second method that SJWs utilize the term, in which the SJWs utilize the term privilege, is as a tool for emotional manipulation and extortion by instilling feelings of collective guilt. You know, men beat women, you're male, therefore you're guilty, so give us resources. Or guilt of the forefathers. You're white people in the 1800s oppressed these other people, therefore you're guilty, so give us your resources. I obviously reject such tactics. But to me, the concept of privilege and, you know, checking my privilege as a trans woman who passes with comparatively minimal effort is not a means of self-flagellation or of extorting resources from others or shutting down discussion. With this single information processor we call a human body, I, like most other humans, are bound to become solipsistic, lest I proactively avoid it. Therefore, checking my privilege and considering the experience and perspective of the average trans woman and how it differs from mine is a means of aligning myself with reality as closely as possible. End.
Well, thank you, Theryn. That was beautiful. And I don't mean that it passes. I mean, I wanted to touch on something that I plucked out that I found that was really interesting. I need a moment to gather my thoughts. So you said, and I think this is very, very telling, that one of the reasons why people might be, okay, let us establish this. Trans people can be discriminated against and obviously be treated with prejudice by men and women, right? And this will be for any number of reasons. That is irrelevant. But one of the things that come from it, one of the things that you mentioned, was that a trans woman is perceived as less useful to society. So their ability to be a utility in the same way that men are is seen as diminished, even though that doesn't necessarily mean that they are. And I mean, are you following what I'm saying so far?
Yeah, that was like my little Evo psych hypothesis. It's just an idea. It's completely unverified.
No, I know.
Of like a trans woman is someone who's trying to fill the feminine role without bearing the reproductive capacity to put the feminine role to good use.
Right.
You know what I mean?
So it's essentially
So it's a useless human being.
Yeah, because they're not. They can't be the utility that men are. At least this is how people would see them. And at the same time, they can't be. They don't have reproductive value because they can't reproduce the way women are. So they sit in limbo. And most people would say, well, if you can't do. If you can't be disposable for us, and you also can't make babies for us, then you're not that useful to us.
Yes, I would say that this, like, if this does occur, it occurs on a very subconscious, kind of primal level, kind of instinctive.
Yes.
Because I think it's like, oh, that's deceptive. That's a deception. We need to do something about it.
You're trying to get out of.
You're wasting resources.
Yeah, you're trying to get out of going to war or going down in that mine. You're trying to get out of it by presenting as a woman. It reminds me of this old TV show called MASH, and there was a character on there named Klinger, and he had a running gag where he was trying to get out of the military, so he was cross-dressing the entire time. And he would also, try to come up with
mentally, unstable, so he would get medical leave.
Yeah, he would try, but the point is that all of it was a con. He just didn't want to be in the military. He was just trying to get out. So none of it was legit, and that was the joke. Was not necessarily the behavior so much as the character itself and the character's motivations. But that's a good, I don't know if they were aware of it when they were doing that, but there's definitely something there to look at in terms of men and women. But the other thing that I was thinking about was one of the things that also is interesting is that oftentimes when I see trans women that are transitioning to men or I'm sorry, transitioning to women, they actually they actually become very feminine. Like they go, you know, and they do it. I don't know what it is, but sometimes they do it better than many women do. And this sort of relates to that video where the one you were talking about, the woman who went into Julie, who goes into the nail salon. And I was also thinking about people who pass very, very well, and they, you know, put on nice dresses, and they put on the makeup and the whole deal. And so they're actually presenting as more feminine and more neotenous and more vulnerable than the average woman is. And I think that may also be a place where, you know, when you might see prejudice from women towards trans women. And that could also, you know, that's another factor that
treat women better than they do.
Yeah, so they can basically, yeah, guys like you,
True.
like you and
don't
Blaire,
know how
women
many
better
girls
than
feel
many
that
women.
way.
Huh?
Like how many like cis women feel that way about trans women?
Yeah.
This is totally true. I literally was thinking about this today because I was in Target and I noticed that I was in Target for about 5 minutes and I had walked by like several like couples that were together and only 5 minutes in there and I had gotten glares from like 3 different women who were with their boyfriends, and I've really have seen that as well. How women can sometimes hate on trans women, not necessarily because they look better, but because I guess I'm just coming from a place of not always having this outward feminine appearance, and now it's so apparent to me that when you hit a level of femininity, I guess, other women take notice and they are a little bit hostile towards it. And I wanted to also, before I forget, touch on a point that Theryn made about the utilization of men, and that's how the reason why trans women are treated badly because they're seen as men with nothing to offer women or society. I think it's interesting that biological women who cannot have children often kind of report the same thing, that sometimes they feel like they're treated as less than a woman or treated badly because of it. So I think that theory, because I've talked about that theory before, I've also I think that it's true on some level.
Mm-hmm. I think it'll be interesting to somehow, with some research, test and verify.
Well, one thing I have noticed, and this is, I think this kind of crosses gender lines, but I've always had friends that I've hung out with that have been like model hot, you know, really, really pretty, and I've always noticed that there's always been sort of a behavior among some women. It's not a universal thing that women do, but some women get really offended by the presence of another woman who is pretty, and especially if she's prettier than they are. And they won't just be threatened, they'll be overtly hostile.
Especially if she wasn't born female and is
yeah. And I think when you combine the two, because there seems to be like some of the prejudice coming from women against trans women is you know, treating them as usurpers. You're taking my place, you're taking my territory, you know, that kind of thing, and as competition. And like women are like that anyway. A competition for attention, competition for particularly for attention of whichever gender they have a preference for, and so if they're straight, they'll see it as competition for men, and they'll be really bitchy. I've even had women get bitchy like that with me, and I'm, you know, pretty average, I think. But I've seen that with women, and I've also seen with some men, it seems like some of their prejudice against trans women is more. It's less of them being threatened by being fooled or anything like that. It's like they're getting out of something. It's very much like the kid in school who wants to know when he or she has a task to do or a standard to be held to, that why does this person get out of it? Why does this person not have to be this, you know, that I have to do or that I have to be? And I think that might have an effect because various gender roles that people feel pressured, you know, to meet, various gender standards that people feel pressured to meet, they're going to react to anybody who crosses gender lines, whether it's just being gender atypical, whether it's being transgender, whether it's anything in between those two areas. They're going to react differently, simply based on their own maybe resentment of what they have to do, and feeling like the person they're being prejudiced against or they're being angry at doesn't have to meet the same standards that they do. Doesn't have to deal with the same shit that life throws at them. I think people do that to each other in general.
Yeah.
And when it gets to a situation where somebody is in a minority group, and I mean minority as in not being large in number, not minority as being in a PC protected group, it makes it harder for that group to get past that.
And another group that I find kind of has it out for trans women is gay men. A lot of gay men are kind of cunty towards trans women.
Really?
Girl, yeah.
A lot of it has to do with the fact that we get the men that they so desperately want, which is the straight.
Yes, honey, yes.
Yes. Because
wait.
Because a gay man getting a straight guy makes them feel so good, like, I'm so hot, I'm so good at whatever that I could convert a straight guy or whatever. So it's this fantasy in the gay community, and they can't fucking take that trans women get the straight man,
So basically, spreading the gay around is an empowering thing for gay men, and when trans women take straight men away, gay men feel like they're losing an opportunity to spread.
No, it's not quite like that.
I think.
It's it's exactly like that. It's they have this no guy who's gay really gets to hear, I am so confused about my sexuality because of you. I'm thinking about sucking cock because of you. Trans women get that all the time, and that is like extremely powerful and intoxicating. It's like your sex appeal and your sexual prowess sort of is validated and by a straight person, and that's like the object of affection, while gay people do not have that validation nearly as often as trans women.
Absolutely. I remember I had quite a few gay friends before my transition, and upon my transition, I remember I just had to cut some of them out because they would just say things that were honestly, they were just so jealousy fueled. Like, they would say things like, well, I could get the guys too if I had long hair, if I did this. It's like, you probably couldn't. And it's like, it's definitely a thing that gay men, they want straight men, they want straight men's attention. And the thing that Cherry said about the constant comments like, oh, you make me question my sexuality, I would do this with you, that's what gay men want, and they don't get it, because in reality, if a straight man is considering having sex with a gay man, it's because they are probably gay, and
or at least bi.
Or at least bi. And with trans women, if a man is saying, I would maybe try this with you, it doesn't make them gay. It makes them want to try something a little different. So I think that's definitely true.
Yeah, they remain quintessentially straight because they're still attracted to a female presentation, female mind, female body, except the dick, which, I mean, let's face it, dudes have been masturbating and seeing dick all the time and having dick in their hand and feeling happy with dick in their hand.
Oh my God,
so guys
it's
don't
not about the dick, it's about what the dick is attached to.
And that is all female, so it's like you don't violate that straightness.
And the thing that Cherry just said is so, I've tried to put this into words so many times, but I think you just did. It's like males grow up with like an affinity for their penis, and so that's why a lot of men, when it comes to trans women who have penises, they don't see it as this insane thing once they get past the initial like, no, then it's not a huge thing to have a woman with a penis, and for a lot of them it actually is more than just something they can get over. It's actually a huge turn on.
Yeah, because you can see it, like, be excited. You can have all those outward signs of arousal that women biologically have worked their hardest to hide. Like, everything that female experiences is so internal that a male never really gets a reaffirmation, a physical sort of affirmation, which is why squirting became so popular, because it's like, oh my God, she's really coming. No, she's peeing, but whatever. I appreciate your enthusiasm of, like, wanting to see female arousal. And yeah, exactly. They have associated their penises with a good time for like since ever. So just seeing a penis, just looking at a penis by itself, like cut out everything else, just a penis is no problem. It's great. What is it attached to? Oh, a beautiful woman. Let's do this. So yeah.
Yeah.
So
Well,
true.
I mean, I think you already said this, but essentially the reason why squirting videos are popular is because guys do like to, they like to see a woman in ecstasy, and that's sort of like, you know, it comes across as proof positive that it's not fake, even though it still is fake. But men like to know that they're seeing a woman that's having a good time.
Yeah, it's also a validation of a sort, and women that's another sort of unfair areas where women get a tremendous amount of validation of that is the boner that men don't get from women. So not only do men not get something as overt as that, but they also don't get compliments or hardly anything else ever that women get. So it's particularly frustrating to me when women complain about getting compliments as if it's harassment. It's like, yeah, you walk 10 hours in male shoes and see how dejected and worthless you feel. So anyway.
Yeah. So I wanted to say, because, okay, we were talking about the kind of envy that I'm going to just say it's envy when that some gay men have for trans women like yourselves, especially women like you guys that
penis envy.
Well.
It's
It is.
all the
That's what it
penises
is.
they converted.
But
No,
when I
like,
was
literally, Brian, I had like a friend of mine, gay friend, when I started transitioning, he was so fucking rude to me. He would, like, in front of, like, my friends, like, point out, like my facial hair, like if I missed a hair. Luckily I didn't have any anymore, but when I did have like horrible things like that, and just like put me down. It's fucking shit. But anyway.
Yeah, that sounds like.
God, it's so true. I've been in so many situations in bars where I've been with gay friends, and if a guy wants to buy me a drink or if a guy wants to talk to me, whatever, they will literally like make a point to somehow mention that I'm trans, or somehow they'll slip up with my name, even though no one slips up with my fucking name.
Just so butthurt and petty. Oh, sorry.
Petty queen, honey.
Yeah, that's faggotry right there.
It is faggotry.
It is faggotry.
PhD in faggotry.
Some things like redneck fag, like you don't need, or a bitch, like you don't need to have the gender or the color or whatever associated with the term in order to actually have the characteristics. It's larger than that. So that's, I don't consider gay people fag, but that is some faggy behavior.
No, that's what I'm saying. No, it's
all that's worse than femininity. That's what they take on. It's like those are the fags, and they're not all gay people, and they're not always gay people when they're like that catty, like all the things about femininity.
So when I say fag, I don't mean homosexual. I mean being faggy, like engaging in faggot behavior. Which is what that is. And I'm sure that Zuckerberg is watching, but
it's a kind of behavior. It's a kind of behavior that was kind of popularized by the gay style of doing it. Just the overly catty, kind of campy faggotry.
Passive aggressive.
Yeah, women love that. Women love their bitchy gay friends.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I don't.
Well, you know why women love their bitchy gay friends, right? Because it makes them look less bitchy.
It makes them look less bitchy.
You're not going to have a moral police looking over your shoulder and being like, you really shouldn't talk about your husband like that, or whatever.
People love people who like behavior that you get in trouble for. When you can hang out with somebody that you can get away with that behavior because you're with them, of course you're going to love that. You're going to love that they engage in it. You're going to love that they're more that than you are. All of that. They make it acceptable. So, of course they love it when they're bitchy.
So, yes, absolutely. So I got to make the point I was trying to make before. So, it's a fantasy of gay men and to try to essentially take straight men and make them gay, or give them a good time, maybe question their own sexuality, for whatever. It's a fantasy. I think that there's something, it's essentially the power of their sexuality influencing another person that they find attractive. And that's something that I think that a lot of people know, where we kind of that it exists, and I also believe that it exists for lesbian women that want to take straight women and make them into lesbians as well, or at least have sex with them and cause their sexuality to be called into question. I used to work in one of my jobs again in Boys Town at an art supply store with college kids, and one of my best friends there was a lesbian, and she would hit on every woman that came in there that she thought was attractive, but her goal was not that she wanted to date them or that she was interested in a relationship, but because she was interested in essentially turning them into lesbians. She wanted, and I think it was because in her mind she thought that all women were a little bit lesbian anyway, and they just needed an extra push. And I thought it was really funny. This is what I'm getting at, though. I think that those fantasies, I don't see any harm in that. I understand it. But what I find is really interesting is that you've heard of this sort of it's kind of like a cliche thing where a straight man meets a woman that he learns is lesbian, and he toys with the idea of trying to have sex with her to make her into a straight woman. And for some reason, though, we see that as misogynist. We see that as unacceptable. I even joked about it with my coworker who was lesbian, where I said, well, I'm sure that, because you probably used to fuck guys, so if I fucked you good enough, you probably turn straight. She got upset about that, which I thought, I only said it not because I really wanted to have sex with her, but I wanted to point out her hypocrisy, because I was like, but wait, we were talking about doing this with women. And this was just something that I had observed, that this is I think that it's probably normal behavior, that people of a given sex would be interested in, that are homosexual, might have an interest in trying to take someone who's straight and make them homosexual, or at least have a homosexual encounter with them. But I think the reverse also happens, where you have, how many times have you seen women who are straight that have gay friends but they want to fuck them? I think that this is just sort of like a normal thing, but for some reason, a woman who's trying to fuck her gay boyfriend or her gay...
Will and Grace was based around that, right?
What?
The whole plot of Will and Grace was based around...
Oh, I know. I didn't watch...
Your friend, right?
Yeah, I don't know. I never watched Will and Grace. I couldn't... Everybody told me I should, and it was in a time slot I couldn't get to. But yeah, I think so. But that was just something that I observed, and I think it's...
women trying to convert gay men, that's actually misogyny as well. And here's why, okay?
Okay, let's hear that.
Feminist logic, okay. Because it perpetuates the idea that women are slutty.
Oh.
Yeah, see, misogyny. All roads. I'm telling you, Brian, all roads lead to misogyny.
Yes, all roads. So men trying to convert lesbians into straight women is misogyny.
Misogyny.
They're trying to rope in their sexuality, which should be allowed to roam free, like Lady Godiva on a horse. And
the media representations of women trying to convert gay men is also misogyny.
Yes.
Because it perpetuates the idea that women are promiscuous.
Yes, and even real-life examples of women trying to convert gay men is misogyny, because they're being influenced by the media.
Right. Exactly.
I'm surprised that they don't say that it's because it perpetuates the idea that women have to be attractive in order to be validated, while ignoring the fact that men also have to be attractive in order to be validated. I want to go back to something that was mentioned earlier, and this is going to be off topic, but it's something that I see a lot that just bugs the shit out of me. And probably part of the reason that it bugs me to see people doing it is because it's something my mother taught me as I was growing up not to do. And that's the way that women run their husbands down. And it's unique to women. Men will talk about problems that they're going through, and they might complain a little bit about, oh, I'm not allowed to do this, or stuff like that, and somebody else will say, well, you want me to get your balls back or something, and they'll razz each other. But women will actually flat out run their husbands down in really cruel and heartless ways to their friends, and then
and their children.
How can you? Yeah, and their children, and this is something this is a disgusting behavior. You take the person that you chose to be the person that you care most about in the world, your partner in life, the person you identify with the most, the person that you want to cling to and be invested in that person's welfare, and then you turn around and you run that person down like your worst enemy, then you can't possibly expect the people you say that shit to ever respect him if you talk about him that way. And it's, I don't understand what makes women do this to somebody that, like my husband, I'm very protective of my husband. And even if there are things about each other we don't always understand because he's very masculine and I'm not, I don't necessarily understand everything about being masculine. It's not something for me to bitch about to other people. And it might be, we're different. We're not the same person. And I don't get why women don't have that sense of wanting to I don't know, protect and preserve their husband's reputation and their husband's place in their social circles and everything. Why, like, I brag about my husband. I'm proud of him. He's the person I love the most in the world, and I can't imagine saying nasty shit about him to other people.
Yeah, the reason, like my mom doing that, like running her mouth about my dad to my to me.
Yeah.
Such a big part of why I didn't have the greatest relationship with my father. Like we didn't hate each other, but we just didn't talk much, and we just didn't, like, I there was a point in my life where I just disliked him. But now, luckily, like we are doing so much better. Like just in recent years, not now, like since end of high school. Probably since we moved to Canada, actually, we've become much closer, which is great. But like that would have never had to happen. That would never have had to happen if my mom wasn't like that. If she didn't use her kids as therapy, And a lot of mothers do that, and it's really shit.
Yeah, this is something that my stepdaughters had to hear from their mother too, and like fortunately they didn't buy that shit. They know their dad, and they adore him too. And like I've always wanted my son, and my stepdaughters to be proud of being their father's children. I've always been proud of being my father's daughter, and I don't. What a cruel thing for women to do, not just to their partner, but to the people that they're running them down to, taking away their chance to have a relationship, just a normal, healthy relationship with a person that by saying I do, they were saying this is the person that's supposed to be most important to me in the world. What kind of shit idea is that? It's about the dumbest thing, one of the dumbest thing that women do. And like, and I'm not just talking about things like, oh, so and so won't go to the doctor. I wish he would go to the doctor. How do I get my husband to go to the doctor if he's sick? Or, men joking about, yeah, my wife wrecked the car again. She can't park. Or stupid little stereotypical things, but outright serious bitching about running their character down or treating them like they're children or stupid, or the way they're presented in television commercials, the idiot dad and things like that. It's absolute cruelty to do that to a person, and I don't know, it just doesn't seem like it's something that you would do to somebody that you love and someone whose welfare you're invested in. And I guess tolerance for this behavior in society is probably one of the reasons that the divorce rate is so high. So I guess that's my whole spiel on that. Because it came up, I wanted to say something. I think we probably have a lot more men in our audience than women, but women in our audience, this is something to be aware of. If you feel like you're starting to do it, think about it and stop.
I have a couple of questions from the chat that I thought I would throw out there before we close it off. I think we kind of covered this pretty well. One was somebody asked about the topic of tranny chasers. And
I have a lot to say about that.
you have a lot to say about that?
Well, quite a bit. I would
Okay.
never date a tranny chaser. I would never date someone who went out of their way to look for a trans person. Also, just general, I probably wouldn't date anyone who has in the past dated a trans person, because there are so few trans people in the world that if you've dated more than one trans person, you're probably dating that person because they're trans, and you're probably going out and looking for trans people. And just personally, I wouldn't.
Right. So that actually leads well into the. I think these two questions are essentially linked. Where people who essentially treat trans women, and maybe there are circles where trans men are treated the same way, as a kind of a fetish, and would that be considered sexism to you guys?
The thing about trans women are definitely seen as a fetish, and that goes to show, or it stems from the fact that trans porn is so popular. I think a lot of times we talk about tranny chasers. I think it's really important not to conflate tranny chasers with just men who are trans attracted, because I have talked to men who message me or whatever, and they'll be like, I know, like, that everyone thinks I'm a tranny chaser because I'm attracted to trans women, and it's like hard for me to even tell trans women that I like them because of that. So I think it's important not to conflate the two, but I think there is a distinct difference. I think what Theryn said, the type of men who like seek out trans women and who see them as nothing more than tits and a dick, I think that's really, to me, it's gross. I wouldn't date someone like that either. I'm really thankful for my boyfriend, who actually didn't even know what transgender meant when I met him. But yeah, I just wanted to make that difference. I think a lot of trans women paint all trans attracted men with the same brush sometimes. Not saying Theryn did, but it happens sometimes.
No, I didn't mean to. If I did, that's not right. But just I'm talking from my personal preference. Guys I've dated, they've only ever been guys who, like, you know, met me maybe in person or online, thought I was really cool, thought I was like attractive and everything, and already had the thought of maybe initiating maybe just a friendship or initiating something, and then learning that I'm trans a little later. And that, like, that often happens, and then those people are like, oh no, trans, no, not for me. It's the people who are like, oh, trans, okay, that's fine, I can continue because I'm still attracted to this person. Like, those are the kind of guys I go on dates on. Not on guys who, like, go on my profile, go and look, is she a tranny, is she a tranny, is she a tranny? I date guys who date me despite being trans, not because I'm trans.
I would also say that there's another part to this too. There is the sexual fetishization of trans women, but then there might be something else, and this goes back to the Nora Vincent story. Imagine a man who finds trans women attractive in particular, and one of the reasons why could be because he knows that a trans woman, having lived as a man for at least part of their life, has a better understanding of him than a woman who's only been a woman. And maybe there's like something that they get from that is an emotional or, you know, like a different kind of connection, because they're like, oh, you understand me more than many women do.
Totally. I think I've had this conversation with my boyfriend before about how, you know, I'm an extremely feminine person, and I didn't have the complete typical male upbringing. I was raised as a male, but I definitely fought it from a young age. But there are certain just parallels in the way that we've lived our lives that if I was a biological woman, I don't think I'd be able to relate to him on that level. So I think there is that certain sense of a connection with the trans woman that a biological man could have that he couldn't have with a biological woman. And this is obviously not to say that, like, everyone should fucking date trannies now because we're just so much better at relating to you. That's not true either. I think trans women have an onslaught of their own issues, and I think
trans women have baggage, like, as well. So it's not, but yeah, there is that. Yeah,
We
so
definitely have baggage.
mhm.
Okay. We're just trying to get an understanding as to exploring this topic of.
And I don't know, maybe we're really good at sucking dick because we have dick.
Well,
There is that aspect of sex that you
Well,
know how it works.
I don't have a gag reflex, so go figure.
Oh my god.
all right. Well, so Theryn, where can all of these sudden fans of yours find you for to email you their letters of appreciation for appearing on our show? I'm kidding. But I'm sure that there will be comments now.
Oh Lord, honey.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like I just invited a swarm of
Dicks.
yeah.
I actually had that.
complaining
I've
about-
already been subject to that when I had Bearing on for a fireside chat. I can tell you that it was sudden and abrupt and without warning. So, but I think unless someone else wants to. Oh wait, what's this? Someone else. Theryn, do you want to take that question? How would you describe your social circle? Are they mainly women, men, straight, gay? Is there any group you avoid? And I would also pitch that to Blaire as well. I guess this is more curiosity.
Okay. So mostly a majority straight men. And then my best friend is like an aromantic, asexual alien. She's awesome. She's really weird, but really.
And what kind of, like, where you live, is it pretty, like, more on the progressive, high population side that's very tolerant, or more on the other side?
Like, my only female friend, I just figured my only female friend is Lauren Southern, actually.
Lauren Southern is the asexual, all that?
Oh, other than the asexual.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I was about to cry. Okay.
Okay, and then for me, I think I used to have a much more diverse social circle before I did videos. Once I started doing videos, all the, not all, but a lot of the LGBT people, a lot of the women sort of fell off from being my friend. I feel like my social circle now is mostly straight people. I do have quite a few gay male friends. My best friend is a gay man, and so there's that. But yeah, I have a couple girlfriends as well. But I don't know a lot of SJW type people as I used to. I definitely used to know a lot more before doing videos.
And you're on the West Coast, so that's like
I'm in
dodging
California.
raindrops. Yeah. Oh.
Right.
I have a question.
Okay.
What is your worst experience as trans women with social justice warriors?
Oh, okay. With SJW.
According to the guy in the chat, we are social justice warriors. His name
Yeah,
is...
well, yes, the chat is cancer.
Yeah, okay.
The small chat generally. I mean, there's some really nice people in there, but you're gonna get the people.
Most of them are nice, though. But most of them are nice.
Yeah,
most
the chat is cancer.
I see you, Black Knight Fool. I see you, Ken. I see you, M Balls. You guys are all good. I don't see Ed though.
NYYN, me. I had to block him because he fucking spammed my whole. I swear, I want to like invite him on my channel. I'd be like, get up on here, you freaking coward, you freaking sock account. Get up on here and have the balls to come up on here and do what I do.
Yeah.
Theryn always pops off at the chat. I love it. Every time I have Theryn on a stream, she eventually always starts popping off, like talking shit to the chat.
Fucking ass coward. Anyway.
Well, okay, social justice warriors. Just because you're trans doesn't mean you're a social justice warrior. So let's let that to lot. Let's let that particular whoever's advancing that in the chat is that's ridiculous.
Yeah,
so I'm interested
I can answer the question.
Just to clarify the question, I'm interested to see how social justice warriors have approached you as trans women, and how if they actually like for me they will speak for women. And they will say, they'll say that all women believe X, and women need us to protect them and stuff like that. And I find it very, very offensive. So I'm curious what your experiences have been.
Okay, so I have a pretty interesting experience that happened pretty recently. I think Theryn knows this story. And I think I may have actually spoke about it on Honey Badger Radio before. Maybe not. Okay, so I was in a sociology class over the winter semester. I took it for shits and giggles for an easy A. And a girl who identifies as non-binary, radical feminist, you know the type. She approached me after class and she wanted to talk about my videos. And she had found out about them through an old friend of mine who she was roommates with. And they had like literally like in the middle of a party, like put my videos on the television in their living room and like talk shit about me. But anyways, she came up to me and she wanted to talk about feminism. And we had kind of a long discussion. She was pretty batshit. She made a couple of valid points, but mostly batshit. And she said that no matter what, I am part of the feminist movement because I'm trans. So we definitely see that aspect of like the identity politics, like because I'm trans, I have to be a feminist, and that really pisses me off.
Yeah, well, I can imagine. I mean, I wasn't. I was dealing with some health issues during most of the show, but I'd imagine that the main topic of the show was, of course, transmisogyny. So it's the idea that feminists are appropriating and reclassifying the situations that trans women face into something that basically, and they do it with prison rape too, and I'll get to that. But they take something that a marginalized group of people faces in their life, and they put it through the feminist wormhole, and somehow it pops out, and that it is actually cis, white, het women who face this thing.
Hold on, what is cishet? I need to know. I see this all the time. What is cishet?
Cis is
cisgendered heterosexual. So like
that means cisgender hetero.
Straight,
okay.
And you like feel like you were born in the right body.
Yeah.
Okay, because someone commented on my Facebook one time. Well, not on my Facebook, but do you guys know the YouTuber Cat Black?
Yes.
Okay, she's a trans woman and she's the SJW type, and she posted about me on her Facebook once saying I had internalized misogyny and internalized transphobia, and someone commented, I commented, refuting it, and someone responded to me with saying, this is why I don't fuck with white cis-het trans women. You only want to suck white cock all the time. And I'm like, what does cis-het mean?
And apparently you're racist too?
Oh yeah, and apparently
you can't possibly
I was racist, and I was the reason why she didn't get her disability money.
Well,
she rationalized that somehow.
It went to you, obviously, somehow. But no, you can't possibly be cis because you're trans. Those cis is
Oh, she said I like sucking white cis-het cock. That's what she said.
Oh, there you go. Okay.
Which, I mean, I do, but...
And they're not really het, though, to be honest. I mean, honestly, I don't think men who are with trans women are 100% straight either, but they're not gay or necessarily bi, so it's like, where exactly do you... I don't know.
You know, I actually agree with that. I think that, well, here's the thing. I think I'm all about labels that are the easiest and that are the most encompassing of what someone is. So my boyfriend, for instance, I've talked about him before. He's never been with a trans woman, never been with a man, never experimented at all before me, and then obviously we're in a committed relationship. So to me, like, what am I supposed to call him? Like 99% straight with an exception of Blaire? Or like, to me, the word straight is just the best word to describe a man who's attracted to trans women.
Well, I think they can describe themselves, but regardless, the idea that that trans, like, this appropriation of another group's issues, I see it a lot. For example, the worst example that I've ever seen is prison rape. Because they say that the male prisoners, and this is actually interesting because it came from Laura Stempel, I believe, who was the director of a Stop Prison Rape, or what was Stop Prison Rape and has become Just Detention International. And she was talking to a feminist publication, and she was describing how, because the insertive male partner, the guy who's having a penis inserted into him, is referred to as a bitch and a woman, that somehow that being raped in prison as a man is really an extension of the way society rapes or community rapes of women in the general society. And, well,
oh my God, Yeah, and then the feminist I talked to, actually going off what you just said, she actually said the reason why more men are homeless and there's more like men homeless is because men have more access to military jobs and that's why they become homeless. So it all boils down to still men are just on top and they um, fall to homelessness because they have access to being, you know, in the military.
And
Yeah.
somehow military and homeless just translate into each other, I suppose.
Yeah, I'm like,
Like,
And,
no actual connection between these two things has to exist. That we'll just link them together because.
and in the case of the prison rape, it was actually a failure of research because the latest research out of prisons is that there is actually considerable respect for men who present, or I'm not sure if they would identify as trans women, but they dress and drag, they present as much as they can as women in prison. And the reason why they've got respect is because they are actually engaging in sex willingly, and they have, and of course it's a prison, so you get respect through being willing to do violence, and they do, and that what they're referred to as fishes, and they're distinct from the population that are punks, who are men who are being forced into having sex in a way that they don't want. And so it was like a critical research failure because the men, or trans women in the prisons who were having consensual sex as insertive partners, but they were agreeing to it and they were presenting as women, but still tough as nails and willing to fight back if anybody tried to force them, got respect. So it wasn't the femininity that was the problem in this instance. It was being forced, being willing, or being somebody forcing you into doing something that you don't want to do. It was being either intimidated into doing it, being a coward, not fighting back, whatever. This was what they were getting at. And it's like it was, like I said, it was a critical. This woman is a director who's supposed to be dealing with trying to end rape in prison, and she doesn't even understand it. She doesn't even look at what's actually occurring. And not only that, she's appropriating all of these issues, rendering invisible what's actually happening in prisons, and the fact that a feminine or a man or a trans woman who presents as a woman or feminine but is also tough is given respect, ignored all that to make women, like cis white women, or women period, in the community, the real victims of prison rape. And it was just like a clusterfuck of stupid. But anyway, that's something that
I knew a trans woman a while ago. I talked to her a few times, and she was a hood rat, and she had been in and out of prison. And the way the laws were set up at the time, I think they're different now, was that trans women were put into male prisons if they had a penis, right? So I think that actually might still be the law of the land. I'm not sure. I have to Google that. But she said that she absolutely like fucking ran the prison. And she's like small, she's not like intimidating at all, but the fact that she was in there, like she had this like social status within the prison, which I think is really interesting because so much of what you hear is that trans women like go through hell in prison. And I think that can happen too, honestly, but it's very interesting, her account of that.
Or they can just run the hair salon in the prison. I mean,
Right.
100%.
Right.
well, like I said, the research found that it wasn't the femininity, it wasn't even taking on a woman's role that was a problem. It was being willing to submit to someone else, forcing you to do something you didn't want. You know, and that was sort of the difference. And like I said, this feminist researcher, enforcing this into her paradigm, she completely, like, critical research failure. But anyway, I've taken up enough of your time. I was wondering, Theryn, do you have any particular stories from social justice warriors being confronted or confrontational?
Not that I can like think of now. None that are worth telling.
Yeah, they're all beneath, like, they're just...
Yeah.
Well, there is. I mean, like, I think probably the worst thing that people like Theryn and Blaire could have experienced is essentially the politicization of their gender status, of what they're, of their identity, essentially. And that's you know, the demeaning thing that social justice warriors do to trans people. They don't really need is to politicize them in the same way they do with women and minorities and the disabled and so on, right?
Yeah.
I don't know if that makes sense.
I think it's pretty gross. I mean, me and Theryn talked about this at length before, but the fact that transgender is suddenly like, it's almost like a political stance to be trans. And I talked about this in my last video about how now you see so many people, you know, appropriating, I don't know like that word, but appropriating being trans, calling themselves all types of super arbitrary, wacky labels like two-spirit, non-binary, fluid, agender, all these things, which I think maybe sometimes could have validity, but for the most part are used as a political tactic, and people assume them to gain oppression points.
All right.
Okay, that's all I had to say.
That's okay. I think we got one more thing we can look at. Hannah made a good, made something available to us that we hadn't considered, and this may be probably where the worst anti-trans behavior probably comes from, or at least ideas and attitudes, and that's from the TERFs, the trans exclusionary radical feminists. Have you guys had any encounters with with TERFs online or otherwise?
Me and Theryn go to battle like on a weekly basis against TERFs. TERFs somehow always end up like in my mentions on Twitter, and yeah, I never realized how many of them there really were until I started doing videos.
So you actually, there's a lot of them?
I mean, it's kind of hard to say like a lot, but there's enough where like once or twice a week I'm getting them in my mentions, and they're definitely out there. They're by no means the majority or maybe even half, but there are a lot of feminists out there who see trans women as nothing more than men trying to get into women's territory and women's space and kind of infiltrate womanhood, and it's really a weird line of thinking.
That is, and then sabotage it from the inside, corrupt it like some kind of disease within women.
I mean, these people are so these people are so conspiratorial. I think that's literally what they think. I think that they think we're like getting in and trying to dismantle feminism from within or some shit.
Because if you're a woman, you're automatically a feminist.
Oh yeah, and if you're a tranny, you're a feminist.
Yeah, that works from that logic, of course, too.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, because there are many, you know, I've seen feminists online that have been that are relatively friendly, that have had debates, and they always, they generally denounce the TERFs, but they always say, well, that's a tiny little group of people that nobody really cares about or pays attention.
And they're always really ugly.
Oh, well, that goes back to that thing I was talking about earlier, where, you know, trans people who pass really well and you know, they're really feminine and they may be really attractive. Yeah, feminists don't like them. So women might be, you know, like in general, like women might be kind of like you know, unfriendly towards them. Just like you were talking, Blaire, when you were in the Target with your boyfriend and you were getting the dirty looks. So take that, multiply it by 100, and then add like 300 pounds, and that's a TERF basically, right? Yeah. So
Totally.
all right. Hannah, did you? Somebody was going to speak up. No.
No, I think everything that I was going to say about this, for the most part, got mentioned. I mean, like just like establishment feminists will co-opt identity politics issues, especially like gay rights and trans rights. Rad femmes do treat trans women like co-opters. They treat them like they're usurpers of women's rights issues, and it's interesting to see the polarity in response from feminists. And it's interesting to see them hate on each other for it too, because like rad femmes and establishment feminists, and then like the grassroots useful idiots that don't really understand feminism but are like, hey, go team women, they'll all get up in arms at each other. They'll get on each other's case about their different responses and their different treatment of these groups. And I don't know, it's like, it would be a good divide and conquer area, but it's just also interesting to watch them sort of eat each other alive over stuff like this.
Yeah, And the last thing I'd like to say before I hand it off to Allison to do the shill and like the goodbyes is the thing that I think that makes us unique, all of us on this panel and people who think the way that we do, is that we're not interested per se in politicizing our identity. By and large, I think that people like Blaire and Theryn just want to be able to be free to live their life in the way that they choose and not be used as a political ball in some kind of great game, in the same way that Allison doesn't want to, and in the same way that I don't want to. And I think that freedom from that that whole thing is that's a completely different animal than trying to use it as some kind of chess piece to essentially ask for resources, and support, and try to alter people's behavior and control their language, and use the force of the state to get things from people that you have decided are your enemy or you don't like. And I think the freedom from those things is a completely different thing than from what social justice warriors often want, which is either your resources or to alleviate their own guilt by giving up their resources and demanding that other people do the same. If that makes sense to you.
Absolutely.
If you disagree with me, then that's fine, but...
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Allison?
I don't know. I'm sorry. I just got into an argument with the troll, and then, or not a troll. He's essentially saying that. Oh, who's echoing? Oh, it's you, Brian. Yeah, you put your head down. So he's essentially saying that because Theryn thinks that a particular compliment is backhanded, that this issue needs to be dug up and and talked about endlessly. I thought compliments were about the person who receives them. Like, if you want to give someone a compliment and they say, I don't find that very complimentary, wouldn't you want to say, oh, okay, that's fine, then I will give you the compliment in the way that you wish to receive it?
Yeah, a compliment isn't supposed to be about you, but anyways.
Yeah, it's like that seems like basic etiquette, but ultimately it sounds like such a trivial and pointless argument that I don't even know why you were continuing to do this. Get a hobby. Do something with your life.
Theryn, just sashay away. Just sashay away.
Sashay away like the good RuPaul.
I'd say we just have an episode where we're all on here just like literally fighting with the chat. I think that'd be fun.
We'll call it the chatterbait.
Yeah, actually somebody has actually requested that we just do Badger spam. Like, just have a show separate from the main show that we just deal with people's brain disgorgements that they send us.
I just want you guys all to know, Terrence Crosby says we look markedly less fat today.
What? That's oh, Jesus Christ. Holy shit, that's a good one.
I saw that one and it just totally...
I never really looked at myself, but I do feel a little lighter, like I'm floating on air. It's like I'm wearing nothing at all. Nothing at all. Nothing at all.
Just the fur.
Oh my fucking god.
It's these pants. These pants don't make my ass look fat.
Oh god, I don't know if I can do a serious shill after that. Well, okay, guys, we're struggling. Well, I won't say we're struggling, but we got GG Gamergate in Toronto funded. We're trying to get Karen to South by Southwest in Austin, and if you don't know, that event is free, so you can actually go there and see her for free. So it might be worth it to fund it. Go over to feedthebadger.com, throw some shekels.
But I want to go.
You want to go?
Yeah, I want to go.
Yeah.
To where?
To where?
South by South Texas.
South by Southwest.
Well,
Yeah.
the panel that Open Gaming Society, the Save Point panel that Open Gaming Society is putting on is free to the public, so anybody can go to it. And if we get the funds, we'll be sending Karen. So if you guys want to see her there, www.feedthebadger.com. And in addition, it's really important to cover these events so that the media narrative doesn't end up being the final word about us. You know, gamergaters and people who are interested in advocating for men's issues. You know, right now the media determines how we are seen. So we need to make an effort to make sure that our events and our advocacy is covered and put somewhere and archived so that there is a record of who we actually are, what we actually advocate for, the kind of people we are, and that we are not misogynist monsters and trolls and thugs, that we are people who care, and we are people who are compassionate, and we are people who want certain issues to come to the foreground because they are not being heard. Because of the very media narrative that paints us as misogynist thugs and monsters. So please, this is vital work. Go to www.feedthebadger.com and help us make sure that the media doesn't get the final word. All right, back to you, Brian.
All right. So you heard Allison, and you know that you cannot resist her chocolatey voice. When she makes a command, you have to follow it. Well, I want to thank everybody for joining me on the show. Thank you, Hannah. Thank you, Cherry. Thank you, Allison, despite health issues and all of that. And I especially want to thank Blaire and Theryn for coming. And thank you, Theryn, for writing up that piece right up until the last possible second. And thank you, Blaire, for bringing the sass, because we need more sass on the show. And yeah, and I want to thank you guys for watching. Please feel free to leave a comment, and well, you know what to do. We got links.
All the haters.
What's up?
I said, and thank you to all the haters.
Yes, thank you for the haters. You make us strong.
Appreciated.
Yes, because rivers move along. You know, you need water and rocks to make a stream. So, and we have both. So
what?
Can we plug our links now?
Yeah, well, I'll put them in the low bar if you like. Just drop them in the chat here. Oh, I said, Allison, you need rivers and rocks to make a stream, which we just did. The rivers are our supporters and the rocks are our haters. With both, you get it. Or as Ali G said once, you know, like in video games, you know that you're going in the right direction when you see enemies. So that's how I see it as well.
Okay, all right, I argue.
Yeah.